Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into what is essentially the ultimate training manual for transforming yourself from someone who's constantly reactive and impulse-driven into an intentional, literally Jedi-like master of composure. We'll be leaning heavily on the teachings of Grandmaster Gnarfard to see how true mastery isn't just throwing power around wildly. It's actually about knowing exactly when and how to use it. So, if you've ever felt completely swept away by your own reactions, well, consider this your new curriculum for self-mastery. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's look at this wildly intimidating number right off the bat. 80,000. Research suggests that the average human mind generates somewhere between 60,000 and 80,000 thoughts every single day. I mean, wow. That is a staggering mental storm happening right beneath the surface of literally every conversation you have, every decision you make, every moment you experience. And let's be real, most of us are completely swept away by this storm without even realizing it's happening. To navigate all that noise, we're going to break down the exact 5 steps Grandmaster Gnarfard uses. We'll cover the mindful foundation, the space between reactions, regulating your nervous system, the power of stillness, and finally, knowing when to act.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the mindful foundation. This is all about learning to be still.
So here's the thing. Instead of trying to just silence that 80,000 thought storm, which, let's face it, is totally impossible, you want to train yourself to observe those thoughts like passing clouds, or like waves on the ocean. They rise, they crest, and they fall. You are not the wave, right? You are the vast, incredibly still ocean beneath it. Every single time you observe a thought without grabbing onto it, you're basically doing a rep in the gym of mental discipline. You're completely dropping your accumulated mental backpack and consciously choosing to release that weight rather than dragging it around everywhere.
Let's move right along to Section 2, the space between reactions. This is where you find your real freedom.
Okay, this right here is an absolutely massive concept. It's the Viktor Frankl principle. Now, Frankl was a Holocaust survivor and a brilliant psychologist. And he discovered something profound. No matter how incredibly hostile the stimulus, whether that's a harsh criticism from your boss, a massive failure, or just a sudden conflict, we are not our automatic reactions. This idea brilliantly bridges real-world psychology with Jedi lore, because no matter the trigger, there is always a gap, always. And it's in that tiny space that your absolute freedom to choose your intentional response actually lives. So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding this 3-part loop. Step 1 is the stressor. Now, most people think a stressor, like a massive traffic jam or a really harsh email, is the thing that causes them stress. But the objective world is actually completely neutral. It's step 2, your perception, the narrative you choose to place around that event that changes everything. That narrative transforms the neutral event, which then triggers step 3, the actual physical and mental strain on your body. Remember this, stress isn't what happens to you. It's the story you tell yourself about what happens. If you master the narrative, you master the strain. And this perfectly illustrates the dividing line between a reflex and responsibility. Over on the left side, we have reflexes, impulses, and optics, basically how things appear to the outside world. Look, if someone accidentally bumps into you or completely misreads a situation, that's just physics or just a bad circumstance. It's not their character. Character actually lives entirely on the right side. Character is how they correct themselves, how they clarify, and how they step up and take responsibility. You are not doomed by your reflexes or the sum of your accidents. You are defined entirely by the intentional action you choose next.
All right, moving into Section 3, regulating your nervous system. Let's talk about calming the body down.
The most immediate tool you have in your arsenal is the Jedi breathing technique. Before taking literally any action or saying a single word, anchoring yourself to a slow, deliberate breath biologically activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It forcefully shifts you away from that panicked fight-or-flight mode and totally grounds your energy into a state of focused presence. The magic here is that you don't have to try to think calm thoughts. By simply breathing deeply, you biologically become calm. Now here's another really powerful tool. While you might not see it explicitly shown in the canon movies, the somatic practice of tapping fits Jedi training absolutely perfectly. Tapping involves intentional touch directly linked with your breath. It works to literally interrupt your automatic reactions, lower your cortisol levels, and calm the amygdala in your brain. It's just a brilliant, direct, physical way to force that gap to open up before you react, which aligns perfectly with this whole philosophy of choosing intention over raw impulse. But listen, Techniques alone aren't going to cut it if your foundation is cracked, right? Resilience is a daily practice, not just some innate trait you're born with. You really have to unflinchingly audit your own vulnerabilities. Are you actually getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep? Because a sleep-deprived mind completely loses its impulse control. Are you getting physical activity? Movement literally metabolizes stress hormones like cortisol right out of your system. Are you maintaining real social connections to prevent the weird, distorted reality of isolation? And finally, you've got to take a no inventory. Every single area in your life where you find yourself saying, I just can't handle that right now, well, that's exactly the map for your training path.
Which brings us to Section 4, the power of stillness. This is where we look at stillness as a conscious strategy.
We really need to reframe this. Waiting is not passive, at all. It is a highly tactical, completely conscious action. A Jedi chooses to wait when the situation is still completely unfolding in the fog, or, and this is huge, when their own emotion is way louder than their intention. You intentionally stay behind when acting right now would just be reactive and costly. Sometimes, the absolute most powerful move you can make is just holding the line, simply because someone else in the room desperately needs a steady, calm presence. Waiting is what allows the real truth to finally surface. And you know, the exact same strategic discipline applies to the words you use. A Jedi is taught exactly when it is most opportune and most critical to speak. Just like silence, your speech is an instrument of precise intervention. You should speak only when those words will definitively shift the momentum, create sudden clarity, or de-escalate a nasty conflict. You wait until your ego is totally quiet and your breath is steady. You never, ever speak just to fill an awkward silence or to just add more noise to the room.
The image of a lighthouse in a storm perfectly captures this ultimate goal. True presence is definitely not about being the loudest person in a chaotic room. Let's be honest, reactive people fill silence with noise, but present people? They fill silence with purpose. It's all about holding the line and arriving with such incredibly deep, grounded intention that the entire room actually stops, turns, and listens to you. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, knowing when to act, the decisive will.
Okay, so a master takes action when the moment actually calls for decisive will. They move when waiting would honestly cause more harm than moving. That's the protector's instinct kicking in. They strike precisely when that specific window of opportunity opens up and not a single second before. And crucially, they only make their move when their inner state is totally, 100% clear of any emotional surge. They act from a deeply centered place once the fog is fully lifted and diplomacy has officially failed. Remember, action isn't the opposite of patience, it's the ultimate fulfillment of it.
I really want this core truth to sink in for you. Optics aren't morality. Intentional action is. This is the ultimate, heroic worldview that we've been building toward this whole time. You are not trapped by your reflexes or your sudden impulses or your past accidents, not at all. You are defined entirely by what you consciously and intentionally choose to do once you become aware. And that, my friends, is exactly where your true character lives.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought. The training we talked about today is pretty straightforward, but the daily discipline it requires, that is profound. So, the next time the storm of stress hits, and trust me, it will definitely hit, you have a choice. Will you let the reflex drag you down into all that noise? Or will you command the space in between and choose the silence? The path of the master is officially yours to walk.